So this is the September 18th meeting of the East Norwalk Neighborhood Association, our monthly meeting. We are going to have some special meetings coming up, but I'll talk to you about that in a minute. And tonight's meeting is going to be actually relatively brief, only because I don't have a whole lot of information. Things have been pretty dynamic in terms of the changes that are going on with zoning. So. Okay. Okay, and so for tonight, just wanted to make one announcement, and this is one of the items that I won't have a lot of information on, even though the public hearing is Wednesday. The industrial waterfront zoning plan is going to a public hearing this Wednesday during the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. And essentially, the plan itself is virtually approved. The city just needs to amend the master plan, otherwise known as the Plan of Conservation and Development, the POCD. It needs to be amended in order to actually adopt the plan officially into the master plan. The city website has the details for the meeting. The meeting does start at 6 p.m., but there are other items on the agenda as well, including another public hearing having to do with Wegmans Markets, their request for signage. So, and I think there are a couple of applications that are on the agenda to begin with. So when we say these meetings start at 6, the item can come up as a public hearing anytime really from then until late in the evening. So you may just want to log in at 6 and then keep an eye on it. I went into the city website today, actually on the weekend as well, looking to see the most updated version of this plan that they're looking to adopt into the master plan. And I'm only seeing a version of it that was approved last August, and I'm not seeing what I think are the updates that have happened to this plan over the past year. August of 2022, I'm talking about. So that's why I'm saying I don't have a whole lot of details on this. I will send an email into the city tonight when we get off this meeting and ask them to direct us to the specific place on the city website where you can find out exactly what this plan is about. In particular, the portions of the industrial waterfront that impact East Norwalk, mostly along the end of Platt Street and over by Constitution Park, where the wastewater treatment is, etc. I do know that with the new designations for industrial waterfront that are in the new zoning regulation plans, there are a list of items that would now be allowed as waterfront uses. And one of the things that we were a bit alarmed about on the East Norwalk side of the river is the possibility for hotels to be approved. So we definitely need to get some more information on that. And for those of you who are interested, we'll try to get that published out as early as we can tomorrow via our email list. And you can take a look at that and then plan to either email in comments to the Planning and Zoning Commission, or you can speak at the hearing tomorrow night. The current business that we still have going on is the zoning regulations, and I'll talk about that in a minute. If there's anyone on here that has submitted their name to volunteer with ENNA or to come onto the board, you may recall that we had committed to meeting with folks in September. We're still looking to do that, even though the time is getting behind us a little bit. But if you haven't submitted your name, or you have submitted it in the past and you haven't heard from us, at least to acknowledge it, you can send us an email at info@eastnorwalk.org. One of the reasons why we're looking for people to step up to volunteer is we need some ad hoc committees to be formed as soon as possible. And we've just kind of been kicking this can down the road, but we need to get back on track with it. Our next regular meeting, monthly meeting, is October 16th. But you can expect that we're probably going to have some special meetings in September and October that are specifically related to the zoning regulations update, and also probably one special meeting that has to do with the charter revision items that are actually going to appear on the November election ballot. Okay, so one of the things I wanted to remind people is that the interactive zoning map that you first saw at the beginning of the summer in terms of the existing zoning in East Norwalk, throughout the city actually, but I'm just going to talk about East Norwalk tonight. The proposed zoning map that you saw at the beginning of the summer had some modifications that were done in June and then modified again on July 25th. So when you go to the city website, to the planning and zoning site, you're going to want to scroll down to what looks like this image right here, the proposed zoning map interactive. However, the reason why tonight is a fairly short meeting is because since the time that this map was last updated for July 25th, the planning and zoning staff have continued to meet with the planning and zoning commissioners and stakeholders, and they have been having a series of meetings where they're discussing different modifications still to this map, based on either making corrections to things that weren't really accurate in the beginning, but also based on the feedback from the community. And so the map that's on there tonight, I don't think actually takes into account the changes that they've made in July and August, or anything that they've discussed so far this month. And that's part of the reason why I really don't have a whole lot of information to share with you tonight in terms of where things are falling out in East Norwalk. But I can bring up a map of where it was on July 25th, so people have an understanding of what's going to be upzoned. And here on the screen, I just wanted to give an opportunity again for people to, the best source of up-to-the-minute information where you're getting exactly what they're proposing is to send in your questions and comments and concerns into planning and zoning staff. And that would be Brian Baker, who's a senior planner for the city, and Steve Kleppen, who's the director of planning and zoning. And you can see their emails here. We routinely have this information in our newsletters as well. If you do have comments, questions, concerns, and suggestions, we are still recommending that you copy the mayor and the two District C council representatives who represent 06855, and we have their emails here as well. And we always have these in our email newsletters too, so if you're not picking them up off of here to jot them down, you can go back to the latest newsletters. Just wanted to remind folks that our petition urging the city to revisit every area of upzoning is still active. I think the last time I looked, we were about at 960 signatures, so we're approaching the 1,000 mark, but still pushing for 2,000. And if anyone does still want a lawn sign for visibility in terms of making your sentiment known about stopping the some of this new zoning, we do have those available as well.
Okay, we do have a hand raised from Lisa. Okay, Lisa, you're unmuted.
I'm Lisa with a deeper voice. Diane, you initially, early on, you said something about a public hearing tomorrow night. Is it tomorrow night or Wednesday?
Oh, I'm sorry, Wednesday night, the 20th.
Okay, and that's the P&Z or
planning and
Waterfront?
Planning and Zoning Commission, and the topic is the Industrial Waterfront Land Use Plan. And for them to have a public hearing to hear from the public, and then to vote on whether to adopt this into the city's master plan.
So this is a P&Z meeting about the waterfront plan, not about the rewrite.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
So this is like a tiny portion of it, but it was pulled out of the plan originally when they did the zoning rewrites for the industrial zones. So a lot of these studies are going on concurrently. And this is a plan that was actually approved last year that is now just being adopted into the POCD. One of the things that's important about that, and I was just scrolling around here to try to find this screen. Hang on one second. Let me see if I can get back to my own screen over here. Hang on one second. Is that the you may have seen in social media, and I think even in traditional print media, that one of the things that happened with this industrial waterfront plan is that it did not get the blessing, so to speak, of the Norwalk Harbor Management Commission.
Right.
And I believe that that is one of the hurdles that typically needs to be addressed before something can be adopted. So the last that I know, and I'm trying to get to the screen that actually has their letter, but I'm not able to find it right now. I don't know why I can't bring that up. Hang on one second. Nope.
Waterfront.
Back to the agenda there. But if you go onto the city website, under the meeting for Wednesday night, there's a link there to get to the industrial waterfront zone plan. When you click on that, it will actually take you to the list of documents associated with the plan. The original plan, all of the staff memos back and forth to the Planning and Zoning Commission. It has the staff memos back and forth to the Economic and Community Development Committee of the Common Council. And it has the full letter from the Norwalk Harbor Management Commission outlining a series of specific reasons why they are unable to support the plan. So I do think that folks should read it, because I know that they make mention there of a number of concerns that they have with the level of development, the potential impact of residential development, the impact on the public access to the waterfront, public uses, and not to mention the environmental impact too, with climate issues and water levels as well.
Another thing I think I saw recently, it might have been in the hour last week, was related to the affordable housing plan that I think is still, it's just starting. And if it's just starting, isn't that a little bit of a cart before the horse when it comes to planning and zoning for the complete rewrite?
Yep, I do not disagree with you there, and I would say that you see that actually with a number of these plans right now. So we just spoke about one of them now is the industrial waterfront plan, but the other one is the affordable housing plan. And actually you can go back another year and also talk about the East Avenue Village Transit Plan. So it seems to me that we have all of these disconnected plans going on instead of coming up with a cohesive plan for the whole city and then identifying those pockets. The one that makes the least sense to me is what you just actually brought up, is the affordable housing plan. It doesn't make sense to me why we're upzoning and rezoning and speaking specifically to logic and rationale that references the need for affordable housing, and yet now they're embarking on the formal affordable housing plan, which, as I understand, was actually due to the state a year ago, but I think the city got some sort of reprieve based on, I think the article said that they were awaiting the latest census tracts from the census numbers.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that
So,
I wasn't misinterpreting that. So
yeah. And
okay.
you know, the interesting thing with that is that what ends up happening then is the timing of these things. If there is a recommendation that comes out of the affordable housing plan that's completely counter to what's being recommended in the zoning rewrite, then how do those things get handled? And what we've seen in the past is something we've suggested probably happens, is that you end up writing a plan that by design is going to fit into a plan that you're already supporting. And that would be, and I don't think that that's a fair way to take a look at a plan to say, we already are looking at rezoning everything to upzone. So then let's go ahead and make sure that the, you know, and you guys have all seen it before, let's make sure the consultants and the steering committee all then devise a plan that actually fits into what we want by design with the rewrite of the plan. It's happened before, and I'm sure that it will happen again. In the past, what we used to do is say, let's hold off on these plans until we can see what the other underlying recommendations are, and then build the plan from those. And we've never been successful in doing that. I guess the next option then is to actually ask for a moratorium on the implementation on any portion of the zoning rewrite that would have to do with upzoning, unless and until there's a affordable housing plan that's accepted by the community. And that won't happen either.
No, good luck with that.
I'm just being realistic. I'm not trying to be negative.
Thanks, Diane.
Yeah. Okay, I think there's some things maybe in chat. So Charles, if you just want to keep an eye on that for me and then just hop out with things.
Okay, sure, there's nothing at the moment.
Okay. One of the things that I do want to bring up to folks that we're waiting on, and I feel like the clock is ticking because we're already into mid-September. We have kind of a good news, bad news situation going on right now. The good news is that at this point, there's no kind of manic push right now to adopt the zoning regulation changes and hurry this through to a public hearing. A lot of folks thought that the public hearing this Wednesday on the waterfront was actually for the whole plan, which would have just created, complete pandemonium here. But that public hearing is only for the waterfront. I asked Steve Kleppen last week about the public hearing for the full zoning rewrite, and they haven't decided anything yet, and he doesn't see it in the foreseeable future. At one point, I know that that everyone was talking about maybe at least pushing things out into October, and possibly considering the request to push everything out beyond the election as well. So I really don't have any more information on that for you. One of the reasons why I'm concerned with that, even though it does give us a little bit of breathing room, is that as the Planning and Zoning Commission continue to review the plan almost weekly at this point with staff, they are continuing to make modifications and recommendations. And so now we're struggling to keep up with each week, like what version are we supposed to be looking at? It's one of the reasons you haven't seen a newsletter really from ENNA, because we didn't want to put something out and then the following week then try to change that or add to it. We're really looking to see if we can get something that's more definitive of what this final plan is going to look like, that's based on the recommendations of the commission. But having said that, we don't want to wait to the point where they come up with a final document and then say we're going to have a public hearing in 15 days, because that really doesn't afford the public the opportunity to understand this complete plan, which is pretty massive, much less to formulate any, reasonable comment or suggestions. And it probably doesn't allow anyone, either as individuals or potential stakeholder groups, to consult with attorneys and also professional consultants in the areas of land use, environmental, etc. So we're concerned about that. The other concern that I have, and you may remember this from last meeting, is ENNA has asked Steve Kleppen and staff to go back and revisit the zoning regulations for the East Avenue Village Transit Zone, which is EVTZ. So I'll just call it that from now on. Within the EVTZ zone is where they develop this menu of bonus amenities that would allow a developer to have greater height and density by choosing from an a la carte menu of possible public amenities that then have bonus points assigned to them. Having dealt with the Cemetery Street application, which, by the way, there'll be an update on that coming soon, but we can't speak about that yet this week. Probably in another week or so, we can speak more publicly about what's going on with that. But the bonus, the public amenity bonus points is the part of the EVTZ zoning that allowed that development to be accepted and then approved. And so ENNA has asked Steve Kleppen, as a part of the complete zoning rewrite that's going on now, to completely revisit the EVTZ zone, both in the areas that it covers geographically, but also to reconsider these bonus amenity points. Having seen now how it works, I think that we can all agree that what we feared might happen actually did come to fruition. And, my suggestion, and I think most of you would agree, is that those points have to come out, and we would have to go back to a straight special permit to allow for anything with, and revisit the density and the height as well. The second piece to that is, by the way, Steve Kleppen has said that he and his staff will be looking at that, and he expected that they'd be looking at it in sometime in September. But again, as that continues to get pushed down the road, I'm afraid that we could come perilously close to a hearing date and still not have any real input or feedback on amending those bonus points. The other piece to that is that when you look at the zoning regulations, we've pretty much, for the most part, have been focused on looking at areas that are going to be upzoned, meaning they're allowed to have a specific density now in terms of residential units, and they can have a greater density under the new plan by right, meaning no special permit. So we've been focused on that, and ENNA really hasn't sunk our teeth into the actual land uses that are changing and the regulations themselves that are changing in regards to what particular uses can go into a zone, and also the regulations having to do with parking, setbacks, building heights, etc. So we still have some work to do on that, and and I'll just put the call out again. If there's someone who can volunteer to help us, it would be the type of thing where we would assign a chapter or a particular part of a zone in East Norwalk and ask you to read through everything and come back to ENNA with questions and concerns and help us really to understand what those changes would be. Because one of the things that is buried in there is when you look at the EVTZ zone, that whole East Avenue corridor that was recently upzoned itself, you'd have to look in the fine print to see that Steve Kleppen is suggesting that developers would be allowed to have 3.5 stories as of right, and would require no special permit at all. So even though it would require a special permit for a certain level of increased density, he's suggesting that if they just want to go to 3.5 stories, they can do that. And it would just be what they call, basically an over-the-counter application. No special permit, no public hearing, etc. So, of course, ENNA and you folks would all be concerned with that, but we're also concerned about what other little tidbits similar to that are kind of buried in the narrative in each one of these zones. And so we really still have to do a great amount of reading. We have asked city staff to try to prepare some cheat sheets for us that are just user-friendly and in layman's terms that can just identify each area in East Norwalk and just basically in English say, here's what's not allowed today and what would be allowed tomorrow if this plan went through. And I think people would really be able to understand that much better if we didn't have to go through several hundred pages of reading regulations to try to figure out, what isn't allowed here now that would be allowed basically automatically once this plan goes into effect. If and when it does get approved, I believe that the city is still looking for an effective date of January 1st of next year. So that will be pretty quick as well. So I know, I think a lot of you folks were hopping on tonight, hoping to be able to get some specific answers from me on some of the areas in East Norwalk. And I just want to apologize in advance, but I just don't have stuff at my fingertips so that I can look at specific areas and say for sure this is what's changing. This is what's going to be upzoned. This is what's going to have a different land use, and be able to go through all the tables to say, here's what wasn't allowed before, and here's what's allowed now. So I'm really suggesting two things at this point. If you have specific questions about your street or your area, or any part of East Norwalk or any part of the plan throughout Norwalk, at this point, I suggested you send those questions directly into Steve Kleppen at City Hall. And that would probably not only be the fastest answer, but we would presume that that would be the most accurate answer that you would get. Because it wouldn't be something that would be open to interpretation to one of us reading it and trying to discern what's allowed and what's not allowed. And also Steve Kleppen would be closest to the items that he knows he's either already made a change to or are likely to be changing prior to this being put to a public hearing. Okay, so if anyone has any questions that you think that I can answer tonight, if you have any comments or suggestions or concerns that you want to raise tonight, or if there's some new issue within East Norwalk that you'd like to bring to our attention, it would be a good time to do it now. Because we're intending to have this as a short meeting and then schedule some special meetings. I think because of all the city meetings that are going on, I think Monday nights tend to work pretty well for ENNA. So I would just say at this point that any special meetings that we go to book will likely be on a Monday night, but we'll have to be flexible, I would say, over the next 6 weeks or so. Okay, does anybody want to add anything in about the particular streets that you know that are definitely still in for upzoning? We've been encouraging people on those streets to write in to City Hall, in addition to ENNA having already expressed our concern and basically just said that we don't support any of the upzoning. For all the reasons I won't go into. You guys already know all those reasons. But it's really important for residents to write in too. I can tell you when I'm listening in on these Zoom meetings of Planning and Zoning Commission, I often will hear both the commissioners and staff say, oh, we didn't hear from a lot of people over there. Or a commissioner might say, I didn't really hear from one person on that street about this change. So I want to say that it's important that they hear from you going through staff. You send your emails into Brian Baker and Steve Kleppen. But I also want to say that all of us together should be challenging the notion that if they're going to be approving things because they didn't hear from anyone and therefore they don't think it's a concern, that conversely, they should be not approving things when they're hearing from 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 900, 1,000 people. So if the litmus test for what they're going to consider changing ends up being, how many and who they're hearing from, then I think that we need to hold their feet to the fire to say we have 900 plus people that are not supporting the upzoning, and we haven't even really talked about the land uses yet. So there'll be more to come on that. I won't mention any names or streets, but I can tell you that there is at least 2 streets that are in the upzoning area, where residents are also taking it upon themselves to go do some door knocking, handing out flyers, and urging their neighbors to either sign a group letter from the street with everyone listed as a with their signatures, or doing a petition that people can sign and can be submitted through into ENNA or separately into the city, and urging people to write into the mayor and Steve Kleppen. If you're on any of the streets that are still slated for upzoning, I think there's 11 of them right now, and you haven't heard of any of your neighbors taking the initiative to do that, we hope that someone will step up and kind of be the street rep and really do 2 things: make sure your neighbors are aware these changes are coming, and B, provide them the information for how they can be engaged. That's what we spoke about: emails, letters, petitions, etc.
Okay, I have something in chat. Craig and Rhonda would like to share an observation about parking.
Hi, can you hear me? Am I
Yes.
on mute? Okay,
Hi.
great.
Hi, Craig. Hi, Rhonda.
Hello. I listened to the last zoning meeting, and a couple of things, they started to bog down, and it seemed to be over parking. And this is where they were upzoning, and they were turning fairly dense areas into multifamily homes, but they wanted all the cars to be able to park off-street because there were talk about garbage and snow removal and cars in the street and unable to pass in the streets now, and with additional people per lot, that hardship. And they held fast. I mean, one of the things obvious would be to allow for a wider driveway than 12 feet, so you could have 2 cars side by side. That would alleviate that, and frankly, a lot of parking problems that exist now. They seemed quite firm about that, and were saying that they could only have multifamily homes where people could park off street. So that was kind of, and most lots in Norwalk that they're looking to change for multifamily are only 75 or 50 feet wide, and that would not be possible.
Right.
So they seem to be bogged down in their own rules without giving way. And they're like, well, then it would depend on what they could go multi-home if they had the right number of ability to park off street, which pretty much negates a lot of what they were planning on upzoning.
Yeah, and I think what will happen there is you'll take a look at parcels that appear today to not be able to accommodate that, because they do have to have the off-street parking, either in the driveway or parking that would have to be in the rear. But I would say a couple of things about that. One thing would be that kind of all of these regulations are written in stone until they're not, and then people would apply for a variance to say, I want to be able to do this multifamily, but then limit the amount of parking. But what it doesn't take into account is that you could, if you were to do a knockdown and do a rebuild of a multifamily and configure your driveway and rear parking to allow for the minimum that's allowed, there really isn't any enforcement of people still parking on the street. Because what they're looking at is they're looking at number of units, and they're not looking at number of bedrooms or number of people. So while you're right, like theoretically, you wouldn't be able to do it unless you accommodated what the minimum parking is for those units. You could still take a look at someone being able to reconfigure the structure on the parcel itself to be able to allow that. And when you have these units that are actually become for investments versus an owner occupied that's looking to convert a 1-family to a 2-family, when you have multifamily, they're not owner occupied, it's very hard then on a two-family to be able to enforce how many people are actually living there. Because a lot of the enforcement and the regulations and the inspections don't come in until you hit a multifamily, which would be 3 family and up, I think is the definition.
Mhm. Thank
And
you.
these streets, a lot of the streets that we're talking about where, you would have greater density with 2 family if you had, if you had to, put in, I think 4 parking spaces, maybe one of the requirements, but you had 2 families that had 3 cars each, you're still looking at 6 cars, so you're still looking at overflow parking. And that would be on streets that are, already pretty challenging as it is.
And the other observation during the meeting was that they seemed fairly flexible. They were listening to people and writing down notes when they took issue with, I think this isn't right, and look at this particular street. They seemed to be taking notes, which was refreshing.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, I observed that
I
too.
don't know.
I
Yeah.
was quite pleased with that. And also some of the nature of the questions too, you could see.
Mhm.
Because there was even a little pushback coming from the commissioners to really kind of tie down staff to say, we're not really sure if, why you're pushing for this. It doesn't make sense. So
Yeah, that was refreshing. They
yeah.
threw you under the bus a couple of times. Unsolicited, they were saying, we don't know why Diane CC is against this. She was pro something and quoted, and I'm sure that must have frosted you over. But
Yeah, it's
because you couldn't comment, it was all on their
you
side.
can't comment
But-
and it, yeah,
So my thought there is just simply that you are not taking a position on this. I think if anything, you are informing us all for us to look at our own neighborhoods and what do we think. I think you're just informing us all to come to our own conclusions. So I thought it was unnecessary for them to editorialize.
Yeah, thanks for that. Especially, it's kind of cowardly to be able to do that and know that I'm unable to. I could
Yes.
flash and raise my hand because I'm anxious to jump up and correct the record. But that commissioner doesn't miss an opportunity to, to comment about me. And that's okay when he's talking about me, but when he's looking to besmirch the good name of ENNA, then we have an issue. But again, it's always hiding behind the cloak of knowing that you can speak and there's no rebuttal to it. In terms of my own, and so there is a distinction, and I try to be careful, but there's a distinction when I post on social media. The posts that come from ENNA are strictly informative. Once the ENNA board takes a position on any item, then that becomes our position. And that's what gets communicated. When I'm posting on social media and I'm posting as Diane Cece, that's my own personal opinion. And just to clear that up, that comment about that I had been in favor of it and now I'm not, I mean, that was a broad stroke of comments having to do with supporting missing middle housing and accessory dwelling units and being able to put in affordable housing. But the caveat to that, and always the explanation, is that where it's appropriate and in modest growth and where the city can support it. And basically we can see that there's so little that the city can support right now in terms of city services that they're really hard pressed to kind of convince me of where these things would work. And I can tell you, because I think people should know my personal stance on this, but again, the ENNA position sometimes is completely opposite. I am a major proponent of affordable housing, and I don't make any secret about that. But and if I thought that any of this was affordable housing, I personally would have a completely different outlook about how this could be better managed. But knowing that none of this is really going to address the need for affordable housing, I personally can't support it either. So hope that clarifies.
Okay, we have another hand raised. We have Roberta.
Hey, Roberta.
Hey, thanks. I just wanted to briefly mention that I wrote a letter about Cottage Street, which is being proposed to be a CD4 zone, which is kind of crazy because, you know, I mean, I think anything that's bordering East Avenue at this point is they're sort of up for grabs. And in addition to that, Mimi Chang wrote a letter which I helped with, and we sent that and asked it to be read into the record this evening at the 4:00 p.m. NCA meeting, which neither of us could attend. I need to probably send a copy of that to ENNA. Basically, it talked about Cottage Street, it talked about the problems on Fort Point Street, and it recommended implementing residential parking passes and wondering what the possible impediment could be to that. So anyway, we, you know, I mean, we've only been talking about it since at least 2017. So I don't know what's hanging it all up, but I just wanted to let everyone know that, you know, that's happening here too. I mean, I'm very concerned about Cottage Street. It doesn't have enough parking on it to begin with. And it's already there's spillover parking all over the place in this particular section of East Norwalk, with many people from other parts of Norwalk and other parts of the Fairfield County and perhaps even the state coming to this tiny little slice of a voting community to partake of amenities with streets that were developed in colonial times.
Yeah.
So I mean,
exactly.
I mean, the whole idea about upzoning Cottage Street, I think, is absolutely absurd. There, you can't even have on-street parking, and a great portion of it because there's a big curve to it. I don't think any of these commissioners have been on the ground at all seeing these streets, or very few.
Yeah, and I think that's another thing that we need to ask, because some of them said that they specifically went and toured the areas that were still on the list. And I can tell you that I do that myself too. I don't want to be a skeptic, but I have to deal in kind of facts and data in this role. And so even though people were sending me pictures of Cottage Street and describing it and everything, I wanted to make sure that in reality, you know, it wasn't kind of like a one-off. And so I took and for those of you who are on here who did that, don't take it personal. I do that with everything. So I took a little stroll, well, not a stroll, but I took a little ride in my car this weekend. And I said, let me just go and see myself. And exactly what you're describing, I saw myself. So
yeah, I mean, you know,
I had suspected I hadn't been down that road in a while. And I said, let me go down and see. And just, you know, the thought of that upzoning, because CD4, I think, is a zone. And this is why I'm holding off on specifics with folks, because, you know, if I haven't memorized this stuff myself, believe me, I know the rest of the community doesn't stand a chance, because
it's a large multi-family zone. See that beautiful building? Can't you just see that on Cottage Street?
3.5 storage, correct? But also commercial use, right? Is CD4? So commercial uses on the ground floor, or
CD4 is a principal building that incorporates 7 or more side-by-side and or horizontally stacked dwelling units, which may have one or more shared entities. And in a CD4 zone, you can have a bed and breakfast, you can have a hotel, you can have an inn, you can have government agencies. I mean, you know, some of these things I'm not necessarily opposed to. It's just, again, how many souls can you crunch into a finite space?
Right. And I think one of the concerns too, and I want to make sure people understand this, is when Steve Kleppen is addressing the Planning and Zoning Commission, and he's telling you that a lot of these uses are allowed, but likely will never actually come to fruition with anyone applying for them. We are very concerned about that, because the fact that they are in the regulation means anybody can apply for it tomorrow.
Absolutely.
If it's not likely to happen and we know we don't want it, then just take it out. And we had already submitted a long list of objectionable uses, mostly the industrial ones, but some other ones in there that we said, just take it out. And so if it's not likely that anyone's going to come in and ask for this, then fine, take it out. If down the road someone wants to put that use in, then they can come and make a compelling argument to do a zone amendment. But in the meantime, those should come out. Roberta, I want to say thank you for reminding me, because there were two items that the can was being kicked down the road that were just not getting any traction on. In addition to the EVTZ bonus amenity points, the other one is the residential parking pass. We've been lucky in that there's a planning and zoning commissioner, actually lives in East Norwalk, Anna Tabashnik. I'm not sure if she's on this tonight or not, but she has been a proponent of residential parking passes, and she's been trying to hold Steve Kleppin's feet to the fire to get moving on that, so that we don't get to the the end of the line here and we still don't have anything to do, anything definitive with residential parking passes. I think at last week's meeting or the meeting the week before that, he had told Mr. Boshnik that he was planning a meeting with transportation, mobility, and parking that week to discuss it. So we need to keep the pressure on with that too, to make sure that they're looking at that. But I do want to say something. I've seen residential parking passes work well in some communities, and I've seen them work not so well. So I would kind of rather they take their time and get it right out of the gate than just throw something in that's either completely not enforceable or somehow is an even greater impediment to the residents. Because if that's a possibility,
I agree. I agree with you, Diane. But 5 years isn't enough time for them to come up with something.
Yeah, I know.
And the other thing too is that it's only going to be as good as it's enforced.
Right.
And we all know what enforcement's like around here. It's spotty,
Exactly.
at best.
Yeah.
So, so there's a lot. I get that there's issues about how they're going to make it happen. And it'll be really interesting to see how many actual residents must use on-street parking here.
Right.
Because there's a lot of us. There's a lot of real residents who don't have driveways or of insufficient parking. I mean, we're a conforming two family.
Right. Yeah.
And we don't have a driveway. I mean, sorry, I bought the house I could afford to buy. It didn't have a driveway.
Right. Yeah. No, there should be some relief. I mean, under normal conditions where you don't have, illegal apartments and overcrowding and illegal parking for transit, it wouldn't be an issue. I mean, there's an argument. I don't want to sound like one of those commissioners, but there's an argument that says, these communities were built that way, and when people bought them, they understood that was the case. But it's a very different scenario here.
When they bought them, it wasn't the case.
Exactly, and that's exactly what I was going to say.
That's the issue right there.
Exactly. So if you look 10 years ago, most of the things that we're talking about weren't the real quality of life just really bad that they are today. And seeing the lack of enforcement and not having the staff or the will to enforce, doesn't really bode well for any of these changes going through and being managed. So thanks, Roberta.
Thank you.
Okay. Does anybody have, it's just about, I think it's 10 of 8. Does anyone have any comments or questions, any new East Norwalk concerns that you have?
Yes, this is Charles. I saw some notice about the complete streets, and I was just curious. They're holding some kind of workshop again around that project. And I was just curious, they seemed, when we were part of the last workshop, they seemed to know nothing about all this upzoning or refused to actually address it. So do you have any information on that?
I don't, except I can say this thing has been around for 10 or 12 years. I was under the impression that we were to be complying with complete streets already, especially anything that had federal or state funding associated with it, and anything that's a state road within the city. So for now, this big push to be coming around for complete streets now, again, it's kind of bizarre to me. It's like the cart before the horse, and I'm not quite sure why this is coming up again, because I think this goes back to Jody Rell, or oh my gosh, it goes back a long way, where the communities had to comply with complete streets principles in terms of pedestrian safety and bike safety and traffic flow and tree canopy and all of those other things. But honestly, Charles, I haven't had time to take a close look at it, and I haven't even checked the dates of their workshops on that one yet.
Okay, and there's one more question in the chat. Is there any information about the Masonic Lodge? Has it been sold, and to who?
Yeah. So there was information on and off that it was sold, and then it wasn't sold, and then it was sold again, and the sale fell through. As of today, maybe someone on this call has some definitive information, but I don't have the latest on the Masonic Lodge at this point. And I also don't have the latest on Jimmy's Deli on Van Zant, although I understand now that sale is they are in contract and at the contingency stage. So that seems imminent. And based on the marketing of that parcel, we expect the application to come in under EVTZ, which is the bonus points amenities. And when the application comes in, we can expect it to be for the maximum density for that parcel, which would be 21 units. Another interesting thing, and I'll try to get some information on Masonic, because we have a few people that are kind of connected. I'll try to get an update for people. If I get one, I'll put it in the newsletter, and if it's more urgent than that, I'll send a separate email. But on the one of the things that's interesting now is there's a sense with the zoning regulations being so close to being defined that there are probably developers out there who are just waiting to see what's about to get approved. And if the new regulations are in their favor, and I will say that to me, it seems like these regulations were almost written for and by developers. So I think what may be happening is that we're not seeing a lot of new applications come up on the pending page, because many of these developers may be waiting for the new zoning regulations to come through, which would be more favorable to them. Others are probably evaluating what's in the current zoning regulations, and rather than risk losing out on a benefit to them, we'll probably try to get zoning applications in ahead of the January effective date. And I'm thinking in particular about Van Zant Street with Jimmy's Deli, because if the city felt that it was time to revisit those bonus points and maybe restructure them so that we didn't have that crazy density that we're getting at Cemetery Street, they would probably want to get an application in sooner rather than later, is my sense there. I haven't heard about any other parcel in East Norwalk, but it's really hard to keep an eye on things because so much of this stuff happens behind closed doors that by the time you know that a sale has happened, it's already basically a done deal. So one of the things we like to watch, though, are the parcels that we know were most desirable. One of them came off the block there by itself, just by virtue of selling out to the state, the old Howard Johnson's parcel at exit 16. Those owners sold to the state of Connecticut, who owns it now for construction staging. And the other parcels, of course, are the Masonic Lodge And also the St. Thomas School as well is on the watch list, as are a number of others too. Sorry about my lighting thing here. Something funky is going on with my lighting. We've got spirits or something. Okay, anybody have anything else or anything new?
Just one last thing, any updates on cannabis in the 25 Van
25
Zandt
Van Zandt.
building?
No, so the last communication with Steve, obviously, either most or all of the proposed marketing that they're doing for uses for cannabis are actually not allowed in East Norwalk. That's one good thing that happened. We're very limited in the type of cannabis operations that can be here. And so while they may be marketing for every, they literally were marketing for every conceivable allowable cannabis use under the state regulations. There's only a couple of those that are actually allowed in East Norwalk. ENNA did submit a request into zoning, though, to investigate a sign that's on the building that's actually advertising cannabis space. And so one, to investigate whether the sign complies with current sign regulations, and the city's sentiment on someone marketing something that would be an illegal use.
There's actually several signs right now.
Okay, yeah, so if anybody can get me pictures of all the signs, then that would be helpful. Because when you send them in, it's just easy for me to just do them as attachments. I know one of the things is that there may be nothing enforceable about the fact that someone's marketing for a use that's not legal, because until they actually go to do a contract or a lease for something with a tenant fit up, then it's just kind of meaningless. It's just somebody saying, I'm going to market it this way, but they can't do it anyway. But the signs themselves are subject to very specific zoning regulations. And so if there's any violation in the signage itself, then we would ask for zoning to enforce it.
Okay, thank you.
And I think that there's probably still some folks who are not comfortable using the interactive zoning regulation map that's on the city website. And I know that it can be confusing, and even if you used it in the beginning, it may be a little confusing now to figure out how to use it and take a look at your street and your parcel and your street and your neighborhood. But I would invite you to email into us and if you need some help, I am personally happy to hop on a Zoom or just a regular phone call with you and walk you through how to use that map. Or if you are a little bit shy about raising your hand here tonight and you have some concerns or questions and you want to speak with me directly, I'm happy to do that as well. It's best for me if you email me, and then I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And to reach me and ENNA is info at eastnorwalk.org. Again, that's info at eastnorwalk.org. Okay, so I think and if no one else has their hand up, I'll get some more information out regarding the waterfront industrial waterfront study for the public hearing on Wednesday. I think people will be concerned about what's going to happen in the Water Street area. So I will include the links to that. But I will also point out in particular the industrial waterfronts that are in East Norwalk, and point out the use tables of what could be changing there. And then generally too, I'll probably hop on that public hearing. One of the other things that we'll do is, because we want the benefit of having listened to staff's presentation of the plan, and also to listen to the commissioners' debate and questions and things. If they're not inclined to vote on it the same night, which, by the way, just we we don't like when that happens, voting on the same night as a public hearing. But if they're not inclined to vote on it the same night, ENNA will also make a request to hold open for public comment, say at least until Friday, so people can review the tape and then maybe send some emails in as well. And we'll do that too. Okay. Thank you, everyone.